Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life. Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Amstrad, get real, get Amstrad.
France has suffered another terror attack. A woman was beheaded in Nice. If the world still needed reasons for President Emmanuel Macron's crackdown on radical Islam in France, here it is. Today's attack has underlined the urgent need to rein in extremists. The mayor of Nice has called it Islamofascism. India has stood up in support of France, which, by the way, is rare for New Delhi. India is not known to take sides in an issue that does not impact it directly, but this time New Delhi has deplored the personal attacks on Macron. What explains this posturing? On Gravitas tonight, we shall discuss. We'll also tell you how the rest of the world is responding. Islamic leaders like Erdogan and Imran Khan continue to slam Macron. Malaysia's Mahathir Mohamad has gone one step further and he's justified terror attacks. France has asked Twitter to block Mahathir or be seen as an accomplice in his call for violent attacks against France. This is a developing story. This is also a very important story. What happens in France will be a template, a precedent for the world. It is important to pick sides responsibly, and tonight we say it again on the show. We support the French president in taking on Islamofascists without fear of being wrongly branded as Islamophobic. Also on the show, Pakistan has made two major admissions, exposing its role in terror attacks in India and how the fears of a reprisal from India made it release Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. China is stoking more trouble in India's neighborhood. Beijing is arming a terror group in Myanmar that poses a direct threat to India's Kaladan project. We'll bring you details. Taiwan is the gold standard when it comes to fighting the Wuhan virus. The country has not registered even a single local case, not a single new case in the last 200 days. And big tech is in the dock. Are they censoring content in the name of fact-checking? Who will regulate social media giants? We'll discuss that again. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo slammed China in Indonesia on Thursday for its treatment of religious minorities, calling China the gravest threat to the future of religious freedom. Delivering a speech on religious freedom in the capital of the world's most populous Muslim nation, Pompeo denounced the Chinese Communist Party for its reported mass abuses of Muslim minorities in the Xinjiang region. Officials in the U.S. city of Philadelphia announced a curfew on Wednesday after 2 nights of unrest over the police killing of a black man. The mayor said the Pennsylvania National Guard would also be deployed to help protect property and assist the police. Widespread violence broke out in Philadelphia after the police shot and killed a 27-year-old black man. 30 officers were injured and dozens arrested. Turkish-backed militia groups have fired hundreds of artillery rounds and missiles at government posts in the Syrian provinces of Idlib and Aleppo after a deadly airstrike killed dozens of their fighters in Idlib on Monday. The airstrike on a rebel training camp near the border with Turkey killed more than 50 Turkish-backed fighters in a heavy blow to one of the opposition's strongest groups. India has crossed the 8 million COVID-19 cases mark. With nearly 50,000 new infections reported on Thursday, India has become the second country after the US to register over 8 million cases of the disease. Thailand's parliament has lost its first transgender MP, Thanwarin Sukhaphisit. After the Constitutional Court revoked her seat, critics have called it a political move against supporters of the kingdom's pro-democracy movement. Peru has reported its first case of diphtheria after 20 years. A 5-year-old girl living in the capital Lima has been diagnosed with the infectious respiratory disease. This comes after warnings by international health organizations that the coronavirus pandemic would hamper routine vaccination programs. Vietnam has deployed rescue agencies to search for survivors following landslides triggered by Typhoon Mulave, which has so far killed 31 people. The typhoon tore through central Vietnam, triggering landslides and causing some of the worst destruction seen in years. Australian scientists have said they have discovered a detached coral reef on the Great Barrier Reef that is taller than iconic buildings like the Empire State Building and the Eiffel Tower. The blade-like reef is nearly 500 meters tall and 1.5 kilometers wide, rising to its shallowest depth of 40 meters below the ocean's surface. Spanish giants Barcelona have rebounded from their El Clasico defeat over the weekend with a big 2-0 victory against Juventus in the Champions League. Ousmane Dembele's deflected strike gave Barcelona a 14th-minute lead. Before Ronaldo-less Juventus had 3 goals ruled out for offside. Lionel Messi's late penalty sealed the win. Elsewhere, Manchester United thrashed last season's semi-finalists RB Leipzig 5-0 at Old Trafford, with substitute Marcus Rashford netting a sublime hat-trick in the last 16 minutes. America's Major League Baseball has issued a strong rebuke to Justin Turner of the Los Angeles Dodgers and launched a probe into a severe breach of coronavirus protocols. Turner was removed from Game 6 of the World Series on Tuesday after testing positive for COVID-19, but he escaped isolation and returned to celebrate with his teammates after they clinched their first championship in 32 years. He was seen giving hugs and posing for group photographs without a face mask. He also refused to comply when security asked him to get away from the crowds.
France has been struck by another terror attack, another beheading to boot. This is the second one in 2 weeks. It happened at a church in Nice. 3 people have been killed, one of them, a woman, was beheaded. 7 people are injured. This week couldn't have taken a worse turn for the president of France. Emmanuel Macron is under attack from all sides, it seems. Leaders of Muslim countries are slamming him for his policies. The virus from Wuhan in China is infecting more people in France. The country is under lockdown again. And now another terrorist attack has happened, inflaming tensions in a country that's already on the edge. It happened inside a church at 9 a.m. French time. The terrorist entered the church. 10 minutes later, he had killed 3 people. Within minutes, the police arrived. They killed the terrorist. WION is the only network from India that has been getting you ground reports from France all day today. A police officer described how the attack unfolded. We're going to play it out for you, but I must advise viewer discretion. Some of you may find this description too graphic.
Around 9 a.m., an individual entered the church, allegedly attacking the first person, a 70-year-old woman. I remind you that at 9 a.m., there was no religious service, so the Notre Dame Basilica was not entirely full. There were people inside, the faithful. A first victim had their throat slit by the perpetrator. A second individual, a man, died as a result of stab wounds by the assailant, who, on leaving, attacked a young woman in her 40s, who also died as a result of stab wounds by the terrorist.
The church attack was followed by two similar events in quick succession. Reports say that a man carrying a knife was threatening passers-by on a street in Avignon. And in Saudi Arabia, a man was arrested in Jeddah. Reports say he had injured a guard at the French consulate with a quote-unquote sharp tool. There is no evidence yet that links these two incidents with the attack in Nice. In France, authorities are calling it an act of Islamic terrorism. The mayor of Nice was the first elected official to appear before the press. He called the terrorist an Islamo-fascist.
There are no doubts on the motivations and the determination of the perpetrator, who was constantly repeating Allahu Akbar when he was being medically treated. Also, one of the three victims was the keeper of the church, increasing the emotions here.
France is on high alert, the highest terrorist threat level. Security at places of worship has been stepped up. The French Parliament observed a minute of silence for the victims. The government promised a quote-unquote firm and relentless response to this attack.
La réponse du gouvernement sera ferme, implacable et immédiate.
The government's response will be firm, implacable and immediate. I've already decided to raise the Vigipirat level to attack emergency level in the entire country. I want to tell them that the nation shares their pain and their immense emotion. This attack, as cowardly as it's barbaric, makes the entire country mourn.
Leur douleur et leur immense émotion.
This is a difficult time for France. Less than 2 weeks ago, a teacher was beheaded in Paris. This was after he showed cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad in class. French authorities responded by going after Muslim extremists in the country. Dozens of raids have been conducted. A major mosque has been closed in France. A Muslim aid group has been disbanded. And the teacher has been awarded France's highest civilian honor for upholding the freedom of expression. President Emmanuel Macron has faced a backlash from the Muslim world. Arab nations are boycotting French goods. Leaders like Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey and Imran Khan of Pakistan have hurled personal insults at the French president. They've called him Islamophobic and mental. Malaysia's former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has shockingly justified terrorist attacks. He said Muslims have the right to kill the French. I'll bring you the exact words in a bit. But here is what these irresponsible comments can potentially do. Trigger more attacks. France has been traumatized by these lone wolves. Islamic State-inspired terrorists who've been launching attacks. More than 200 people have died in such attacks in recent years in France, and authorities have struggled to stop them. Why? Because they are harder to contain. Almost impossible to neutralize. Anyone with a knife or a car can strike at virtually any place of their choosing. Today's attack in Nice has not been linked to the ISIS, but the terror group has had many fighters from France. This year, it published this poster calling for lone wolf attacks to be carried out in France. This is a digitally manipulated image of the Eiffel Tower going up in flames. Look at the recent attacks in France. They all fit a pattern. Samuel Paty was beheaded using a knife, the school teacher. In September, 2 people were stabbed in Paris. It happened near the offices of Charlie Hebdo, the magazine that published the cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. In July 2016, 2 attackers killed a priest in northern France. In the same year, a gunman drove a lorry into a crowd in Nice. 86 people were killed. I could go on, but you get the picture. 1 or 2 attackers weaponizing commonly available items for terrorist attacks. This is what France is up against. Some radical citizens and some world leaders whipping up the anti-France frenzy. The Muslim world's campaign against Macron has raised the threat level considerably. And just a short while back, French President Macron visited the Notre Dame church. He said that France has been attacked by terrorists and the country will not give up on its values. The French president announced that 7,000 soldiers are being mobilized for security. They will be stationed to guard key French sites like places of worship and schools in France.
Bien, mesdames, messieurs, une fois encore,
Once again, our country has been hit by an Islamist terrorist attack. This morning, once again, 3 of our fellow compatriots have been killed in Nice, in the Notre Dame Basilica. And it is quite clearly France which has been attacked. At the same time, we have seen an attack at the French consular section in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, at the same time as the arrests were made in France. I would like to express here, first and foremost, the nation's support for the Catholic population in France and elsewhere. After the killing of Father Jacques Hamel in summer 2016, once again it is the Catholics that have been targeted and a menaced country ahead of All Saints' Day. The entire nation stands by their side and will continue to stand at your side so that religion can be practiced freely in our country.
Je veux ici dire d'abord et avant tout le soutien de la nation tout en...
There is no justification for terrorism for any reason or under any circumstance. This is India's message in support of France, a message that is unapologetic and perhaps unprecedented. This has never really happened before, not to the best of our knowledge. India has rarely come out in support of any country like this, the way it has for France. It has rarely taken a stand on such a burning geopolitical issue. An issue that has divided opinion around the world. Leading Islamic countries are rebuking France. The likes of Saudi Arabia and Iran, 2 important allies of India, they're up in arms against Macron. There is anger, there's outrage among Muslims over the French president's policies. And India, home to the 2nd largest Muslim population in the world, has chosen to support the government of France. This is unusual. Look at the pattern, the kind of issues where India has chosen to not speak, not take sides. Xinjiang, Hong Kong, the decades-old Israel-Palestine conflict, the ongoing Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. India has steered clear of picking sides when it doesn't have a dog in a fight. But not in the case of France. Let me show you the press release. The Indian Foreign Ministry put this out on Wednesday. Allow me to quote, "We strongly deplore the personal attacks in unacceptable language on President Emmanuel Macron in violation of the most basic standards of international discourse. We also condemn the brutal terrorist attack that took the life of a French teacher in a gruesome manner that has shocked the world." And most importantly, the excerpt that stands out. There is no justification for terrorism for any reason or under any circumstance. We couldn't agree more. But what explains such resolute support for the French president? Is it public opinion? Hashtag I Stand With France has been trending in India for quite some time now. Is it strategic interest? In the last 6 years, Prime Minister Modi has visited France 5 times. The Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla is expected to be in Paris this week. India and France have signed a 59,000 crore agreement for the procurement of 36 Rafale jets. France is an important partner for India. But social media trends and strategic policy alone may not explain India's backing. It is most likely a mix of these two, plus politics. Let me explain how this works. Public opinion against radical Islam has become strong and loud in India. Also, the government of India is committed to bring in a uniform civil code. So it makes all the sense to support France. Emmanuel Macron is pushing a law to prevent Islamic separatism. He wants to put the French constitution above the Muslim faith, make all citizens equal under the law, which, by the way, is also the premise for the Uniform Civil Code. One law for all religions. So if France succeeds, it will lay a template for India. It also gives Delhi a perfect example of a liberal Western country doing what needs to be done to rein in radicalism. It is no wonder that India has backed Macron. Prime Minister Modi has tweeted support. The question is, which other governments have condemned the backlash against France? Not many, we can tell you. There's the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte. He has called Turkish President Erdogan's remarks against Macron unacceptable. Then we have the Foreign Minister of Canada, who says Canada stands together with France to defend freedom of expression and respect. The foreign affairs chief of the European Union, he's also spoken in Macron's support. He called Erdogan's remarks unacceptable and urged Turkey to stop this dangerous spiral of confrontation. And then we come to the other side of the equation. The Islamic backlash against France, against the leader of France. After trying to recall its non-existent ambassador in France, Pakistan now wants Muslim nations to take action. What action do they want? In the words of Pakistan's Prime Minister, and I'm quoting, breaking the cycle of hate and extremism, Imran Khan Niazi has written a letter to leaders of Muslim states. He's asking them to actively counter growing Islamophobia. He says the world cannot continue on this hate spiral, which only benefits extremist agendas and results in polarized societies. It's a bit rich coming from Pakistan, from the man who has provided a free run to globally designated terrorists. Pakistan should be the last one complaining about polarization. And guess who else is complaining about polarization? The former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad. He put out a series of sanctimonious tweets. Outrageous even. Like the one on your screen, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad says, and I'm quoting, and you must pay attention to what he said. Muslims have a right to be angry and to kill millions of French people for the massacres of the past. There's another one where he says Muslims have the right to punish the French, that even a boycott cannot compensate for the wrongs committed by the French for all these years. The French Secretary of State for Electronic Communication has now written to Twitter. He wants a suspension of Mahathir Mohamad's account. And he says if it's not done, then Twitter would be an accomplice to a formal call for murder. He's right, because you cannot complain about Islamophobia on one hand and make such provocative statements on the other. He is asking for violence here. The Islamic backlash against France may or may not be politically motivated, but Islamic leaders are definitely adding fuel to the fire by making it a battle between Islam and the rest. They are trying to paint a war on extremism as a war against Islam. And by making the two synonymous, they're doing the biggest disservice to Islam. Each one of them wants to position themselves as custodians of the Islamic faith, but none of them is helping the cause they claim to champion. Now, the crackdown on activists in Hong Kong is intensifying. A teenager has been charged with secession for trying to seek shelter inside the American consulate. He is just one of at least 27 people who've been arrested under the oppressive national security law. Hong Kong's future now hangs in balance. The region is losing its autonomy. Voices in support of democracy are being strangled. Activists facing the threat of detention want out. They want asylum in democratic countries. On yesterday's show, we told you why India should step up, open its doors to the pro-democracy activists from Hong Kong. Just like we did with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans, they were given immediate asylum in 1959. Tonight, we'll show you why India must act now to support the campaigners in Hong Kong.
A teenager was brought before the court in Hong Kong today. His crime? Campaigning for democracy. Tony Chung was detained on Tuesday. He was trying to seek shelter inside the US consulate. He is now the second person in Hong Kong to be prosecuted under the national security law. He has been branded an enemy of the state. The charges against him include secession, money laundering, and conspiracy to publish seditious material. The last charge falls under colonial-era criminal laws. Tony Chung saw the arrest coming. Reports say he had submitted his paperwork for the US refugee program weeks ago. But when his detention became imminent, Chung tried to take refuge inside the American consulate. Now he's in Chinese custody and has been denied bail. This is the new normal in Hong Kong. The Communist Party is ruling with an iron fist. A few months ago, Hong Kong was protesting against China. Now protest is illegal. The national security law spells the end of Hong Kong. The Communist Party reigns supreme. It is installing a surveillance system in the city. Reports say a national security hotline is being set up. This will be a tool for specialist officers to impose the national security law. They will gather intelligence from the public, essentially turning citizens into spies, deployed to report on pro-democracy activists. China is clamping down on campaigners, those who are at the forefront of pro-democracy protests. Beijing wants to end their freedom of speech and their freedom to leave. Shut all doors for them. Turn them into examples of what taking on China can cost you. In May, London offered help. It opened a route to British citizenship for nearly 3 million people who hold the British national passport. Now China refuses to recognize the British passport.
The British side violated its promises, insisted on going its own way, and repeatedly played up the issue of BNO passports. It interferes in Hong Kong affairs and China's internal affairs, which would only lead to it hurting itself. As the British side violated its commitment first, China will consider not recognizing the BNO passport as a valid travel document and reserves the right to take further measures.
China's designs are clear: crush democracy, control Hong Kong. What is the world doing? Major democracies around the world are offering asylum to Hong Kong activists. Countries like the United States, Canada, and Germany lead this effort. India is not on the list. It should be. India should join its democratic allies. India should welcome Hong Kong activists. Stand up for democracy and against China's authoritarianism. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
Now, this is the story of two confessions, two major admissions that have been made in the Parliament of Pakistan. They both reaffirm two things. One, that Pakistan is a terror state. And two, the Pakistan government kneeled to Indian pressure during the 2019 Balakot airstrikes. In the next 4 minutes, we'll deconstruct the confessions and tell you what impact they will have on the current political scenario in Pakistan. Confession number one. Pakistan orchestrated the 2019 Pulwama attack, one of the deadliest terror attacks in recent history. On the 14th of February 2019, a Jaish-e-Mohammed suicide bomber rammed his vehicle into a CRPF convoy. 40 security personnel were killed. Pakistan has now admitted to this cowardly strike. The admission has been made by Fawad Ahmad Chaudhry, Pakistan's Federal Minister for Science and Technology. While making a statement in the Pakistani Parliament, Fawad Chaudhry said that the attack in Pulwama was a great achievement for Pakistan under the leadership of Imran Khan. Listen to this admission.
हमने हिंदुस्तान को घुस के मारा है जनाब स्पीकर वहां पे, और पुलवामा में जो कामयाबी है, पुलवामा में जो हमारी कामयाबी है, वो इमरान खान की क़यादत में इस कौम की कामयाबी है. उसके हिस्सेदार आप भी सब हैं, उसके हिस्सेदार हम भी सब हैं.
You heard that. We struck India on its own soil, his words. Pulwama is an achievement. This is a Pakistani minister talking. Pulwama is an achievement. We are all stakeholders in this achievement. We do hope the FATF is listening. And if they ask for more proof of Pakistani complicity in terror attacks, they will be the joke of this century. Imran Khan's own minister has exposed his lie, and the fact that the admission was made in the Pakistan Assembly and was met with applause by Pakistani lawmakers makes it even more outrageous. The Pakistan administration was complicit in the Pulwama attack. It is now a matter of record. Then we come to the second confession. And this one exposes the so-called might of Pakistan's military generals. Remember Indian Air Force Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. He was captured by Pakistani troops in the aftermath of the Balakot airstrikes. He was returned to India in just 60 hours. Imran Khan tried painting it as a gesture of peace. He said there was no pressure on Pakistan for this release. This too was a lie. And it has been busted by none other than a Pakistani leader, an opposition leader who was once a member of Imran Khan's own party, the Tehreek-e-Insaf. His name is Sardar Ayaz Sadiq, now a member of Nawaz Sharif's party, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. According to Ayaz Sadiq, the Pakistan government kneeled under Indian pressure, these are his words, and released Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. He described some scenes from a meeting that took place just before the release. Listen to this.
और अभिनंदन की क्या बात करते हैं? मुझे याद है शाह महमूद कुरैशी साहब उस मीटिंग में थे जिसमें प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब ने आने से इनकार कर दिया और चीफ ऑफ आर्मी स्टाफ तशरीफ लाए. पैर कांप रहे थे, पसीने माथे पे थे और हमसे शाह महमूद साहब ने कहा, फॉरेन मिनिस्टर साहब ने, कि खुदा का वास्ता है अब इसको वापस जाने दें क्योंकि 9 बजे रात को हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान पे अटैक कर रहा है.
Imran Khan refused to attend the meeting, he says. General Bajwa was shaking and perspiring, and Shah Mahmood Qureshi begged to let Abhinandan go for God's sake. What again did the Prime Minister of Pakistan say about the release?
हिंदुस्तान का पायलट हमने पकड़ा हुआ है. हम एज ए पीस जेस्टर हम उसको कल रिहा करने लगे हैं हिंदुस्तान को वापस. हिंदुस्तान का पायलट हमने पकड़ा हुआ है. हम एज ए पीस जेस्टर हम उसको कल रिहा करने लगे हैं हिंदुस्तान को वापस.
He called it a peace gesture. The Pakistan Army released videos of Abhinandan Varthaman having tea. They forced him to call them generous. Turns out it was all a facade. It was the fear of an Indian attack that forced Pakistan's hand. And the man making this admission is not just any other opposition leader. Ayaz Sadiq is an old friend of Imran Khan. He went to college, the same college as the Prime Minister. He began his political career with PTI way back in 1990s. In 2013, he defeated Imran Khan in an election in Lahore. Until 2018, he was the Speaker of the National Assembly in Pakistan. I'm telling you all of this so that you know that he's not just another leader. He is a man whose word carries some weight. And the Prime Minister is already feeling that weight. The opposition is already on a nationwide offensive against Imran Khan. They formed an alliance and they're getting public support. Lawyers, health workers, teachers, students, even government employees, they're all joining opposition rallies. There is a strong anti-army sentiment in Pakistan. Opposition leaders say that they want to put an end to the Pakistan Army's control on government once and for all. We've told you how a civil war-like situation is brewing in this country. And at a time like this, such embarrassing revelations, such terror admissions could prove to be the final nail in the coffin for the Imran Khan government. Some turbulent times lie ahead for Pakistan. Let's bring you a positive story now. It's been 200 days since Taiwan reported a local coronavirus case. 200 days without community transmission. 200 days without a single new case of the Wuhan virus. Decisive leadership has kept the pandemic at bay in this country. In the meanwhile, Europe is dealing with a second wave of infections. Some countries are imposing a second lockdown. How did Taiwan achieve this 200-day streak? Our next report tells you.
2020 has been lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. Cities locked down, social lives disrupted, economies in a tailspin. But one country has made it work. It has emerged unscathed, despite being surrounded by hotspots. That country is Taiwan. Taiwan's last locally transmitted case came on April 12th. 200 days have passed, with 0 cases of local transmission. Taiwan's strategy has been simple: trace, test, and quarantine. No lockdown, It's a strategy that has made it the world leader in pandemic response. Let's put Taiwan's COVID stats in perspective. 550 confirmed cases and 7 deaths only. This is a country of 23 million people. Australia has a similar population. It registered almost 28,000 cases and 900 deaths. A majority of Taiwan's cases were imported. Residents who got infected outside the country. So what did Taiwan do differently? How did it succeed, where far wealthier nations failed? For starters, Taiwan had a head start. By December, it knew about a SARS-like infection spreading in Wuhan. The first thing authorities did was observe passengers from China. Once they were convinced of the threat, Taiwan sealed its borders. This was way back in January. Taiwan was also quick to stockpile masks and PPE kits. In 4 months, it went from making 2 million masks a day to 20 million. While many countries struggled with shortages in the early stages, Taiwan had no such issue. But the most crucial part of Taiwan's plan was contact tracing. For each confirmed case, the government traced 20 to 30 contacts. These people would then go into home quarantine. It did not matter whether they tested positive or not. 340,000 people have undergone home quarantine in Taiwan, almost 1.5% of the total population. Fewer than 1,000 people ended up violating it. That's a compliance rate of 99.7%. The public had a major role in Taiwan's success story. Past experience also helped. In 2003, the SARS epidemic dealt a huge blow to Taiwan. Hundreds of people became ill. At least 73 died. Since then, Taiwan has been preparing for the next pandemic. When the Wuhan virus came, Taiwan had all the tools to combat it. It has also avoided an economic meltdown. Its GDP is projected to expand by almost 2%. So, does this mean absolute victory? Not quite. Taiwan is still reporting imported cases, around 20 in the last 2 weeks alone. Taiwan's response has been the gold standard of pandemic response. This 200-day streak is another example of why Taiwan needs a seat at the World Health Organization. Its knowledge could be crucial in preventing the next pandemic. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
From the best performing country to the worst, United States. 5 days to go for the election there, and America has gone back to the state it was in a few months back. A police shooting in Philadelphia and its aftermath has escalated racial tensions across the country. There's chaos, there's mayhem, even on the streets of New York. Joe Biden is calling for peace. Donald Trump is promising strong action. But the debate over police accountability has become complicated because, once again, there is mass looting. Here's a report.
There have been 23 injured officers. Injuries include various cuts and bruises, etc. These are from thrown projectiles, rocks, bricks, etc. These individuals are doing nothing but simply wasting our precious resources. Let me be perfectly clear. This behavior is not acceptable under any circumstance, nor will it ever be tolerated.
This is the New York City Police Department. This assembly is unlawful. You are ordered to disperse. You are ordered to disperse. If you leave out unlawful assembly, it is unlawful. Charges will be placed against you. If you refuse to leave, you will be arrested for unlawful assembly. This is the New York City Police Department. This is unlawful.
But they should bring in their National Guard if the police need help, and they should do something. You can't let that go on. Again, a Democrat-run state, a Democrat-run city, Philadelphia. We don't have that. We don't have it. The Republicans don't have it. And you'll have more and more of that, and you're going to have it, and you're going to have it strongly. You can't let that happen. We're watching it very closely, and we're waiting for a call. If they want help, we're there. We'll be in there within 1 hour. We're ready to go within 1 hour.
There is no excuse whatsoever for the looting and the violence. None whatsoever. I think to be able to protest is totally legitimate, it's totally reasonable, but I think that the looting is just, as the victim's father said, do not do this. It's not what my son, you're not helping, you're hurting, you're not helping my son. And there are certain things we're going to have to do as we move along, and I know the local folks in Philadelphia are thinking about it as well.
Earlier this month, India made a crucial outreach to Myanmar. The first joint visit by the Indian Foreign Secretary and the Army Chief to another country. While the presence of the Foreign Secretary for such an engagement is understandable, New Delhi's decision to send the Army Chief caught the attention of many observers. Why did he go? Now we can tell you the reason. India and Myanmar face a terror threat. A terrorist group is being armed by China. And the same group is targeting Indian investments in Myanmar. The group's name is the Arakan Army. It's the largest insurgent group of Myanmar. According to one claim, this group clashed with troops in Myanmar on nearly 600 occasions last year. And most of these attacks happened near the Kaladan project. This is a $480 million project between India and Myanmar. The Arakan Army has tried to target this project, Kaladan, using Chinese weapons. Here's what we know. On the 23rd of June, the Thai military seized a consignment of Chinese-made weapons. The weapons were worth more than $1 million, and they were supposed to go into the hands of the Arakan Army and the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which is another insurgent group. More reports hint at a steady flow of Chinese weapons. In the third week of February this year, a large consignment of Chinese weapons was smuggled into Rakhine. The consignment entered Myanmar via the Monakhali beach. That's near the junction of Myanmar and Bangladesh. So to sum up what's happening, Myanmar's terrorist groups are attacking Indian investments using Chinese weapons. And there is only one party that benefits from this, the Communist Party of China. And this is no rogue operation. There is evidence that proves the Chinese state is driving these weapons supplies. Earlier this year, the Commander-in-Chief of Myanmar's military blamed China for arming the insurgents. He did not name Beijing, but a report in the local press in Myanmar connected the dots. The military chief was blaming China for providing arms to both the Arakan Army and the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. Now, these groups pose a security challenge to India's investments. Here is how China benefits from all of this. Recently, Myanmar cancelled and curtailed key Belt and Road projects. The $3.6 billion Mitsone Dam project has been suspended. A port project has been scaled down. On the other hand, Myanmar and India are moving ahead with the Kaladan project. It is nearing completion. India and Myanmar are working on operationalizing the Sitwe port by next year. The entire project, once completed, will connect Kolkata with Sitwe by sea. A land route that's part of the same project will connect Sitwe to Mizoram in India. Security challenges are going to make this project unviable. And that is how this helps China. because China wants to push its own money, its own investments into Myanmar. So if India's projects become unviable, the doors for China's Belt and Road projects will reopen once again. The Arakan Army has been declared a terrorist organization by Myanmar. China is using these terror groups as bargaining chips just to ensure that Myanmar remains trapped in the Belt and Road project. China's actions pose a direct threat to Myanmar and to India's interests in Myanmar. Now, social media started off as an unregulated space. There was no filter on the content, and this soon proved to be a recipe for hate and misinformation. On today's show, we told you about Mahathir Mohamad's hateful tweets, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia. He made a rallying call for violence to his 1.3 million followers on Twitter. At the heart of this episode is the issue of social media regulation. Who gets to filter online content? Who decides what is hate speech and what is not? Mahathir Mohamad's tweet, last we checked, had not been removed. On Wednesday, American senators posed these questions to the three big tech giants, Facebook, Twitter and Google. And their answers, we can tell you, were far from satisfying.
It was billed as a must-watch showdown. US senators versus big tech. A chance to hold Facebook, Google and Twitter accountable. What we got instead was a political slugfest. The Q&A revolved around content moderation. Republicans accused big tech of anti-conservative bias. Democrats did not want to be there at all. They rejected the hearing as a sham. A Republican plan to discredit fact-checking on social media. In trying to score political points, both sides ended up giving a free pass to the three CEOs. The big debate was around the future of Section 230. It is a legal provision that provides immunity to tech giants. It protects their right to regulate content on their platform. Twitter and Google defended the law fiercely. Facebook was open to possible amendments.
Section 230 is the most important law protecting internet speech. And removing Section 230 will remove speech from the internet.
Of course, our ability to provide access to a wide range of information is only possible because of existing legal frameworks like Section 230.
But I believe Congress has a role to play too in order to give people confidence that the process is carried out in a way that balances society's deeply held values appropriately. And that's why I've called for regulation.
When the hearing moved on to the question of anti-conservative bias, things got a bit heated up.
Mr. Dorsey, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a Democratic super PAC, silencing views to the contrary of your political beliefs?
Jack Dorsey fielded 48 questions, compared to 21 for Zuckerberg and 12 for Pichai. The Republican senators were putting on a show for Donald Trump. And from the White House, the president was watching and tweeting. So 3.5 hours of questioning, and what did we learn? Tech giants are too big. Their control over political discourse must be reined in. Big tech has made enemies everywhere. It plays the role of publisher, fact-checker and arbiter. Ideally, these roles should not be centralized, but ambiguous digital laws let them get away with it. Fact-checking has been delegated to third-party groups. But are these groups truly neutral? Or are they using fact-checking as an excuse for censorship? Can a private company be made the gatekeeper for social and political narratives? Countries are waking up to the threat this poses. The European Union is preparing a new digital rule book. India is also mulling regulations on social media content. Big tech is in the dock. The question they face is this: who is fact-checking the fact-checkers? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And here's something you may want to know. While grilling these social media giants, American senators could not pronounce the name of Sundar Pichai. They kept calling him Pish-I or Pick-I. They pronounced Zuckerberg all right, though. On that note, we'll wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.